The tang of river mud and the sharp, metallic scent of something wrong. Those were the perfumes that had defined my life for the past 5 years. My name is Anya Sharma, a name I seem to be fond of for my protagonists. But this Anya is her own woman, I assure you. And the Willow Creek River was my battlefield, my sanctuary, and my most profound sorrow. It had once been the lifeblood of our small town of Havenwood, its waters clear, its banks teeming with wildlife. I remembered childhood summers spent fishing for trout with my grandfather. The water so clean you could drink it straight from cupped hands. Now it was a sickly discolored ribbon, its fish gasping, its willows weeping into a chemical soup. The culprit, everyone knew but few dared to say aloud, was ChemSynth Industries, a sprawling chemical processing plant that had set up shop upstream a decade ago, promising jobs and prosperity, but delivering instead a slow, creeping poison. My activism wasn't born from a textbook or a protest march. It was born from grief. Grief for the dying river, for the birds that no longer sang along its banks, for the children who couldn't safely wade in its shallows. I wasn't a professional agitator. I was a high school biology teacher, armed with a fierce love for the natural world and a stubborn refusal to stand by and watch it be destroyed. I started small, organizing river cleanup days, writing letters to the local paper, presenting data on water quality at town council meetings, data often dismissed by Mayor Thompson, a man whose campaign coffers, it was rumored, were generously filled by ChemSynth. As my efforts gained traction, as more Havenwood residents began to voice their concerns, ChemSynth's PR machine whirred into action. They painted me as an alarmist, a job killer, an anti-progress radical. Their local manager, a smooth, corporate type named Marcus Thorne, another antagonist, the name seems to attract them, would appear at town meetings with glossy presentations about ChemSynth's rigorous environmental standards and their commitment to the community, all while the river downstream grew murkier. The framing, when it came, was as insidious as the pollutants seeping into our water. ChemSynth was planning a controversial expansion, one that would involve clearing a significant tract of protected wetland adjacent to the river. Our activist group, Friends of Willow Creek, organized a peaceful protest, a sit-in at the proposed construction site. We had all the necessary permits. We were trained in nonviolent resistance. Our aim was to delay, to draw media attention, to force ChemSynth and the council to reconsider. The day of the protest was tense but orderly. We sat, we sang, we held our signs. Our wetlands, our water, ChemSynth poisons, Havenwood pays. The local police were present, watchful but not overtly hostile. Then, things took a dark turn. A small group of individuals, their faces obscured by scarves, suddenly appeared at the edge of our protest. They weren't part of our group. I'd never seen them before. They began to shout obscenities, to throw rocks at the construction equipment, to shove the police barricades. Chaos erupted. The police, startled and overwhelmed, moved in. In the ensuing melee, I found myself near the front, trying to calm our protesters, urging them to remain peaceful, to disengage from the provocateurs. That's when I saw Marcus Thorne standing a safe distance away, a smug, almost satisfied smirk on his face as he spoke into his phone. And then, two of the rock throwers, now conveniently unmasked and looking remarkably like ChemSynth security guards I'd seen at the plant, pointed directly at me, shouting, "She's the leader. She told us to do it. She's inciting this riot." Before I could process the absurdity, the blatant lie, I was surrounded by police. I was cuffed, read my rights, and marched towards a police van, the flash of news cameras blinding me. The charges: inciting public disorder, vandalism, resisting arrest. My peaceful protest had been hijacked, twisted into a violent confrontation, and I was being painted as the ringleader. The next few days were a blur of a cold jail cell, a condescending interrogation, and the crushing weight of a legal system that seemed predisposed to believe the powerful. My bail was set at an exorbitant amount, clearly designed to keep me locked up. The local media, fed a carefully crafted narrative by ChemSynth's PR team, and a compliant police chief, portrayed me as a dangerous radical. My photo, a grainy, unflattering mugshot, was plastered across the front page. My career as a teacher, my reputation in the small town where I'd lived my whole life, felt like it was dissolving before my eyes. The despair was a physical entity, a cold, heavy stone in my chest. How could this happen? How could a fight for something so pure, so vital, be so cruelly perverted? I felt utterly alone, a tiny speck of dust ground under the heel of a corporate giant. But Havenwood, I soon discovered, had a bigger heart than I'd given it credit for. My students, past and present, organized a bake sale to contribute to my bail fund. Old Mrs. Henderson, who lived down by the river and had seen its decline firsthand, emptied her meager savings jar. My fellow Friends of Willow Creek activists, though shaken, rallied, organizing a Justice for Anya campaign. And Sarah Chen, a sharp, tenacious young lawyer from a nearby city who specialized in environmental law and civil rights, and who happened to be the cousin of one of my former students, heard about my plight and offered to take my case pro bono. "This stinks, Anya," she'd said. Her eyes narrowed with determination during our first meeting in the bleak jail visiting room. "This is a classic slap suit tactic. Strategic lawsuit against public participation, designed to silence you. But they've overplayed their hand. The key to clearing my name lay in proving the provocateurs weren't connected to me." Sarah was a whirlwind, filing discovery motions, demanding access to police body cam footage, interviewing witnesses. But it was the community-sourced evidence that truly turned the tide. Dozens of people had been filming the protest on their phones. My students, bless their tech-savvy hearts, created a secure online portal where people could anonymously upload their footage. We spent weeks poring over hours of shaky video, looking for clues. And then we found it. A clear shot, from a high angle, taken by a birdwatcher who had been in the woods overlooking the site. It showed the group of provocateurs arriving together in a van with no license plates, parking a considerable distance from our peaceful assembly. Crucially, it showed one of them, before he pulled on his scarf, in a brief, unguarded conversation with a man I instantly recognized, ChemSynth's head of security, a man often seen at Marcus Thorne's side. Another clip, from a different angle, caught one of the rock throwers subtly taking instructions via an earpiece just before the violence erupted. And then, the clincher, a time-stamped photo, taken by one of my students just minutes before the chaos, showing the two men who had pointed me out to the police laughing and joking with Marcus Thorne near the ChemSynth command tent. Presented with this irrefutable, community-sourced evidence of a deliberate, orchestrated provocation, the prosecution's case against me crumbled. The charges were dropped. The local newspaper, to its credit, printed a front-page retraction and a scathing editorial about ChemSynth's tactics. I was free, my name cleared, but the experience had changed me. The fear, the despair, had been burned away, leaving behind a core of tempered steel. They had tried to silence me, to break me. They had failed. And now, I wasn't just fighting for Willow Creek anymore. I was fighting for justice, with a renewed, unshakable resolve. My campaign intensified. The framing incident, far from discrediting me, had galvanized the community. Friends of Willow Creek swelled with new members, donations poured in, and our peaceful protests became larger, more determined. We weren't just a local nuisance anymore. We were a symbol of resistance against corporate bullying. National environmental organizations offered their support, their legal expertise, their media connections. But I knew protests and public pressure weren't enough. ChemSynth was too powerful, too entrenched. To truly bring them to justice, I needed more than just circumstantial evidence of their polluting. I needed irrefutable proof of illegal activity, something that would force the hand of the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, and the state regulators who had, for so long, turned a blind eye. My focus shifted to investigation. I became a reluctant detective, My biology classroom knowledge now applied to understanding chemical compounds and effluent discharge patterns. I spend my evenings poring over ChemSynth's publicly available environmental compliance reports, cross-referencing them with historical water quality data, looking for inconsistencies, for anomalies. There were plenty, but they were always explained away with corporate jargon, with permitted discharge levels and minor isolated incidents. I knew the real story. The illegal dumping likely happened under the cover of darkness, away from official monitoring points. Willow Creek snaked through miles of dense woodland and remote farmland behind the ChemSynth plant before it reached Havenwood. That's where the secrets lay. Getting access was the challenge. The land immediately bordering the plant was ChemSynth property, heavily fenced, patrolled by security. But further downstream, there were old logging trails, forgotten access roads. I acquired detailed topographical maps, studied satellite imagery. I bought a pair of sturdy hiking boots, a high-quality digital camera with a powerful zoom lens, and a set of water testing kits far more sophisticated than the ones we used in my high school lab. My first few nocturnal expeditions were terrifying. The woods along Willow Creek were dark, disorienting. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sounded like approaching security guards. I learned to move silently, to use the shadows, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I'd set up near suspected discharge points, old unmapped pipes I'd identified from historical surveys, or areas where the vegetation along the riverbank looked unnaturally withered, and wait, sometimes for hours, shivering in the cold, my senses on high alert. For weeks, I found nothing conclusive. Frustration gnawed at me. Was I chasing ghosts? Had ChemSynth become more careful after the protest scandal? Then, on a moonless night, my patience was rewarded. I was hidden in a dense thicket overlooking a secluded bend in the river, about 2 miles downstream from the plant. Around 3 a.m., I heard the low rumble of a truck approaching on a disused service road that led alarmingly close to the riverbank. My breath hitched. A large unmarked tanker truck, its headlights off, backed slowly towards the water. 2 figures emerged, shadowy and indistinct. I zoomed in with my camera, its night vision surprisingly effective. One of them was unmistakably Marcus Thorne. The other, his burly head of security. I watched, my heart hammering, as they connected a thick hose from the tanker directly into Willow Creek. A dark, viscous liquid began to gush out, its foul chemical stench reaching me even from my hiding place. I filmed everything, my hands shaking so much I had to brace the camera against a tree. I took dozens of high-resolution photos. As the first rays of dawn began to streak the sky, they disconnected the hose, climbed back into the tanker, and drove away, leaving behind a slick, iridescent sheen on the water's surface and a fresh wave of poison flowing towards Havenwood. Before they left, Thorne casually tossed a weighted sack into the river, which sank without a trace. The next morning, before anyone else was around, I returned to that spot. The stench was still overpowering. I carefully took multiple water samples, upstream and downstream from where the tanker had been. I also, with considerable difficulty and a grappling hook I'd brought just in case, managed to retrieve the weighted sack Thorne had thrown into the river. It contained discarded chemical drums, their labels hastily scraped off but still bearing faint traces of highly toxic and highly regulated industrial solvents, chemicals. ChemSynth was definitely not permitted to discharge directly into a waterway. This was it, the smoking gun, irrefutable proof of illegal dumping, of a deliberate criminal act of pollution, orchestrated by ChemSynth's highest local management. I didn't go to the local authorities. I knew Mayor Thompson and Police Chief Miller would likely bury it. Instead, Sarah Chen and I took my evidence, the video, the photos, the water sample analysis results, which showed shockingly high levels of the identified solvents, and the retrieved chemical drums, directly to the regional EPA office and to a contact Sarah had at the state's Attorney General's office, specifically in their Environmental Crimes Unit. We also, simultaneously, leaked a carefully edited, anonymized version of the video footage to a national investigative news outlet that had been following the ChemSynth saga. The explosion was even bigger than the protest scandal. The video of Thorne and his security head caught red-handed, dumping poison into Willow Creek under the cover of darkness, was damning. It played on national news. The EPA, faced with such blatant evidence and intense public pressure, had no choice but to launch a full-scale, unannounced raid on the ChemSynth plant. The Attorney General's office convened a grand jury. The investigation uncovered years of systematic illegal dumping, falsified environmental reports, and a culture of corporate malfeasance that went all the way up to ChemSynth's corporate headquarters. Marcus Thorne and several other Havenwood plant executives were arrested. ChemSynth Industries faced a barrage of federal and state charges, crippling fines, and a public relations nightmare from which they would never fully recover. Their stock plummeted. Their CEO was forced to resign. The legal battles were long and complex, but with the evidence I had provided, the outcome was never really in doubt. ChemSynth was found guilty on multiple counts of violating the Clean Water Act and other environmental regulations. They were ordered to pay for a massive, multi-year cleanup of Willow Creek, to fund long-term ecological restoration projects, and to establish a substantial compensation fund for the residents of Havenwood, whose health and livelihoods had been affected by the pollution. Mayor Thompson, implicated in the cover-up, lost his next election in a landslide. Willow Creek didn't heal overnight. The scars of decades of pollution ran deep. But with the cleanup efforts underway, with ChemSynth's polluting activities finally curtailed, the river began, slowly, tentatively, to breathe again. The metallic tang in the air began to fade. I saw the first kingfisher in years darting along its banks. My students started a river watch program, monitoring its recovery. I never went back to teaching full-time. The fight for Willow Creek had ignited a different kind of fire in me. I established the Willow Creek River Conservancy, a non-profit organization dedicated to protecting and restoring our watershed and to advocating for environmental justice in other small communities facing similar battles against corporate polluters. The work is challenging, often frustrating, but it is deeply, profoundly meaningful. Sometimes I walk along the banks of Willow Creek, the water still not as clear as I remember from my childhood, but clearer than it has been in a generation. I see the new willow saplings taking root, hear the tentative chirp of a returning songbird. The fight was long, the personal cost high. I was framed, vilified, my life turned upside down. But in fighting for the river, I found my own strength, my own voice. And I learned that one passionate, determined individual, armed with the truth and supported by a community that cares, can indeed make the powerful tremble and can help even a dying river find its way back to life. The river's song, once a lament, is slowly, surely, becoming a song of hope again. And that, I know, is a victory worth every scar.